When I first heard that the mass murderer in New Zealand had recorded the event with a GoPro camera and live streamed it to Facebook, I determined that I was going to find that video and watch it. Now, for those of you that have a moral problem with this, I'm sorry, but for me, something more important takes precedence over any issues of decorum. I have a need to know, you see. I'm responsible for defending myself, my family, and whatever innocent people I can in the extremely unlikely event that this should ever happen to me. And if I'm going to be prepared for that mentally, I need to know what it looks like so I can think about it now, think about what I would do and how I would do it. So before we get to the lessons, let me just tell you what I saw. The shooter walked into an unremarkable little building. It didn't look like a mosque, it looked more like a rec center. His weapon and the other weapons he had in his car were covered in slogans spelled out in big white letters. I couldn't make out the words, but they looked like they'd been painted on with liquid paper. There were a few people speaking in the doorway. The shooter raised his rifle and mechanically pulled the trigger, and it was just pop, 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 pop. 2 or 3 people went down right away. A wounded man tried to crawl away down the hall. Pop, 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 and he stopped moving. As he went down the hallway, he took snapshots here and there before entering a large hall. Turning to his left against one wall, I saw a large group of people huddled in the corner, following some ancient instinct to get under some cover. I'm sure that's what I would have done. There was another group on the right wall as well. The shooter turned back to the left and started firing into the mass of humanity. I don't remember hearing any screaming or crying, certainly no ranting on the part of the murderer, just the rapid, methodical pop, 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 pop. A young man made a break for it. He appeared to have bumped the shooter, and I hoped he might have made it past him, but there were some more pops and he went down at point-blank range. Returning to the crowd on the left, the shooter stood in the doorway and just began firing into that mass of humanity, just pop, 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 which didn't seem to have any visible effect other than to cause people to stop moving. Then he turned to the right and did the same thing to the other group of terrified people. No screaming, no yelling, not a word from the shooter that I can remember anyway. Then he methodically shot every single person in the room several times each, just calmly executing the wounded. He shot an old man with a snow-white beard in the head. The force of that bullet blew his fez against the wall, and that was one of only 2 times I can remember where the full impact of the violence of a bullet hitting somebody was clear and visible. After he shot up the right side, he turned around and headed back out the hall to the entrance. As he stepped outside, a pool of blood was starting to spread under one of the first people he'd murdered on the way in. The shooter came out to the street, looked left, and then turned right. He walked a few steps down the sidewalk so that he could see down an alley with the mosque on one side and parked cars on the other. I saw 2 figures seemingly a long, long way away, but that was probably due to the wide-angle lens. He fired multiple times, and they both dropped. He then calmly walked back into the mosque, and then as calmly and methodically went back to the shooting into the mass of dead or dying people. Then he walked back to his car. When he got to the sidewalk, I saw 2 people running out from the corner of the property. He fired on them, and they both went down. One of the people he just shot was a woman with long black hair. She was lying on her side in the street with her hands raised for help. He shot her in the head, and that was only the second time that the actual force of those bullets could be seen. Then he shot her again in the back. Then he walked to his car, opened the trunk where there appeared to be a shotgun and perhaps another rifle, all covered with this strange white lettering. He got in his car, drove away, and opened fire on some people from the car. Now, I know for a certain fact that I saw him spare a few others, but I couldn't exactly see why he shot some people and not others. I could guess, though. So, why did I just walk you through that nightmare? Well, because there were several things that surprised me as an eyewitness to this massacre, and the one surprise by far was how silent, calm, and methodical this murderer was as he removed priceless individual lives from this world. You know, I've read a lot of history, especially a lot of military history. I've read countless stories of trench combat, jungle ambushes, the thoughts and feelings of men being cut to pieces as they stepped onto beaches, and the thoughts and feelings of men who were doing the cutting to pieces. They're all tales of fury or rage, bloodlust, madness, stories of sorrow, regret, sympathy, courage, self-sacrifice, mercy, and sometimes even kindness. There are many reports of men under so much stress that they literally saw red. The landscape turned blood red by the intense blood pressure inside of their own eyes. All of these accounts were filled with emotion, packed with emotion, because that is what sane people feel when they're placed into situations like that. This shooter never rushed, never hesitated, and he walked with the same almost absent-minded calm, the kind of movements that you and I might make if we searched our own house trying to remember where we left our car keys. When we talk about these people being insane, We imagine them spitting and cursing as they go about their mission of murder. In our minds, we want to put rage into them because blind, raging hatred is the only emotion that we can conjure in our sanity to get close enough for a motive. That maniacal rampage is what we imagine because we're human beings trying to understand something inhuman. Real insanity is far more repulsive than that. Witnessing real insanity is to watch a creature calmly and coolly doing what we human beings cannot do. The utter lack of screams and wailing and blood, the absence of any outward signs of madness that takes you to a place where you begin to realize that this is not about Christians versus Muslims, whites versus blacks, Nazis versus Jews, loners versus the popular kids, or liberal values versus conservative values. There's only one distinction, one line in all of these shootings and mass murders, and that is the line between human beings and upright bipeds that look like human beings, between the repulsive but human cliff of passionate hatred and the abyss of feeling no feeling whatsoever. That's what I took away from this, and what I suspect happens in virtually all of these mass shootings. It's actually very simple. It's us versus them every time. Us versus them, living human people of uncounted political views and religious beliefs, in other words, the innocent, against creatures that look like us, talk like us, walk like us, but which are as far short of humanity as a rock is from a rose. Watching this person at work, and that's what it is for them, it's simply a job to do, you begin to realize that the inanimate object that we need to fear is not a gun, it's not a bomb, it's not a truck plowing through a crowd or an airliner flown into a building. The inanimate object that we need to find and destroy is the detached, shark-eyed, unsmiling, ungrimacing mask of predators which we will not nor cannot understand and which has been with us since Cain used his semi-automatic rock against the skull of Abel. They are the weapon, and that's what we need to be looking for. And it turns out, in retrospect, they were pretty easy to spot, every one of them pretty much. The only way to prevent these horrors in the future is for us to be looking for the right thing in the right places. Huns marking their conquests with pyramids of 10,000 skulls, Aztecs blandly cutting the beating hearts out of 80,000 human beings in 4 days, SS officers gently steadying small children on the edge of the ravine before shooting them in the back of the head. There's no religion, no ideology that can make an actual human being do these things. The creatures that can do these things use politics and religion as a fig leaf to cover the fact that there's nothing underneath the fig leaf. Nothing. There is no person there. This massacre and all of the others we've seen were not the fault of Donald Trump or Louis Farrakhan or David Duke or Barack Obama or anyone else. It didn't happen because of 4chan, GoPro, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and whatever other messages might have been spread. And to suggest that a human being might be capable of this cold-blooded execution of innocent people because of something a Swedish man might have said while playing a video game is just plain infantile, it's incorrect, and it's cruel. Accusing anyone of complicity in this, in other words, assuming that somebody else was able to make that kind of influence on somebody, well, that's to say that there is no fundamental humanity and no free will, that this insurmountable chasm between human and non-human can be bridged with a stray tweet or a Facebook post. We believe these things because when we see these horrors, we get angry. And we get angry because we're human beings, all of us, who can put ourselves into that room with those other human beings as these alien bipeds work their way down their carefully prepared checklists. We want to believe it's somebody's fault because we are not willing to face the alternative, which is much more terrifying. And that's the simple truth that there are right now, walking among us, creatures with human faces who possess all of our skills and all of our intellect and all of our ability to make meticulous plans. But these individuals do not feel pain or grief or remorse or even elation and satisfaction. They lack the smallest shred of humanity, and that by definition makes them inhuman creatures who don't act on behalf of any human agency and whose only company on this earth are each other.